Hey guys, Decimate here with another video on Faction Wars, and today we're going to cover the Barbarians. High Elves and Barbarians are both considered the two easiest factions to get done, and with the addition of Scyl the Drakes as a free login reward for the Barbarians, this one might be the easiest, especially if you don't have Arbiter yet. So let's take a look at the index and see who else we can bring in along with her. Alright, let's take a look at the Legendaries, and first up is going to be Altan. Altan is a great clan boss champion. He's kind of known for his A1 here, which has a pretty good chance of keeping a decreased attack up on the clan boss. He's defense based, so he's going to be easy to keep alive. His passive can actually revive someone if he does kill a champion in the waves for Faction Wars. This can be really nice. And then his A2 puts up increased defense on all allies and a shield on all allies if he does kill somebody, which he can hit really hard, so he probably will be doing for you. So a great champion to bring into Faction Wars because of those. Next up is Scyl the Drakes, and she is kind of the star of this show. She's got a little bit of everything, and she is a great champion with a great kit, especially for free to play. Her passive is going to heal everybody by 10% of their max HP every time she gets a go, and also put out a random increased speed buff on one ally, which isn't great, but it's pretty cool. It's a little extra added bonus there. And then she's got a revive, again great for Faction Wars. She's reviving with 50% HP and a ally protection, so that ally protection is really nice to keep them from just dropping again right after she revives them. And then she's got her A2, which is a AoE, hits 2 times, and each hit has a 20% chance, bookable up to 35% chance of placing a stun. So a really nice CC ability there, hits pretty hard as well. And then her A1 attacks one enemy and can put out a decreased speed and also a chance of decreasing the turn meter. So awesome A1 as well. I haven't booked mine, but I would highly recommend if you're coming up through the game for progression purposes to book her. She's definitely worth books and will make her even better than she already is. Not necessary for Faction Wars, but certainly a champion I would recommend booking if you've got her. So next is going to be Cantra. She was a fusion recently, really good champion as well. She has a kind of a crazy passive here that's going to make her take less damage for every debuff on her attackers, heals whenever debuffs fall off, and then if there's enough debuffs out there, she has a chance of placing provokes. She can also place her debuffs on weak hits, so I think she might be the only champion in the game that can do this, so that's kind of cool. And then she's placing a lot of debuffs on her A2 here, which is a 3-hitter, and each hit has a 50% chance, bookable 75 chance of placing one of these debuffs here. And all of these are great for Faction Wars. It's random which ones you're going to get out there, and if you do book her, you're going to get more out there. So another possible bookable champion, again not necessary. I didn't book mine for Faction Wars and she worked just fine. And then her A1 is got a little bit of a buff strip here, which can be kind of nice for taking off some counterattacks possibly, or the unkillable buffs that Paragon puts out in Faction Wars. So that A1 is actually pretty nice as well, and she also hits very hard. Next we've got Elder Skarg. He recently got a buff and he's now pretty good. His A1 is going to put increased speed on him if it's critical, and if it's not critical, he'll bump up his crit rate, so that's kind of cool. Probably you're going to have his crit rate max, so it's going to throw out the increased speed. His A2 attacks one enemy, hits pretty hard, and then places extra hits for each buff or debuff on the target, and he can do up to 3 of those. And then it puts HP burn and True Fear out on everybody if it does place all 3 hits. And then he steals all the buffs. So really crazy ability there. Pretty wild, can be useful for Spider, and is definitely going to be good for Faction Wars as well if you get some buffs or debuffs out there. And then his A3 is also crazy, puts out a bunch of True Fears, regular fears, puts increased defense on him, and provokes on legendary champions, and the debuffs can't be resisted. It's just a really wordy skill here, kind of nuts. And then his passive makes him take less damage from legendary champions, which you can see in the later stages of Faction Wars. And then also if a legendary champion does attack him, he's going to deal damage back to them. So pretty good champion now. I didn't actually use him in Faction Wars. I pulled him after I completed Barbarians, but could definitely come onto your team. Next is Valk. Probably everybody knows what she does. She's probably the best counterattack champion out there out of the 3 that are available. and she does a lot of work for you, puts up huge shields, the counterattacks. Great champion, absolutely would be on your team if you've got one. Fortunately, I don't. Turvold hits really hard. He kind of takes a little bit of setup to reach his full potential. He needs lots of buffs on him. He does place some buffs on himself, but this A3 is one of the hardest hitting abilities in the game if he is well buffed. So he would definitely come onto your team as a pure damage dealer if you can fit him in, and definitely a really fun champion to play around with. And last, we've got the new Void Legendary Ursuga Warcaller. She is a lot to handle, as you can see, and she's probably the best damage mitigation champion in the game now. Her passive is going to take critical damage onto herself that your allies receive, and then her A3 puts out ally protection and puts a Strengthen on her. Strengthen being probably the best defensive buff in the game. Just flat damage reduction, really nice. Her A2 is going to do an AoE and put decreased crit damage and decreased attack on enemies who have high attack, and decreased speed and defense on enemies who have high defense. So really good A2 there. Can hit pretty hard, but you're probably not going to build her for damage. She's probably going to be more for damage mitigation. And then her A1 can put out a block cooldown skill debuff for 1 turn, which is really nice, especially if you've got her counterattacking. So she's getting that out there a little bit more. But great champion, Void Legendary, so not a lot of people have her, and I don't either. Next, let's look at the epics. Most of these epics are pretty good. They've got quite a few that are going to be pretty good damage dealers for you, throw out some debuffs as well. They're all certainly usable in Faction Wars. Ina can throw out decreased defense and weaken, although it's a single target. Jotun recently got a buff, and he's now, well, he's always been HP based, but his damage is now based on HP, so that makes a lot more sense for him. He throws out the small version of decreased defense, yeah, and some HP burns, and actually hits pretty decently now, so not a bad option there. Next we got Sakara. She is alright. She can also put out weaken for you, deals okay damage, got a little buff strip here, and then fills her own turn meter. And she's got a synergy here with Alika if they're both on the same team, and will revive herself if she is killed and Alika's there with her. And then we've got Aether. Aether is pretty annoying in some of the Faction War waves. He's not quite as good if you're trying to run him by himself without his partner, Kalia, but he is actually not that bad, and will put counterattack on himself whenever he's hit with a crit. And also heals himself. So that's on a 1-turn cooldown when you have it booked. So he can actually come in and do some pretty good damage for you, and he does throw out some provokes as well. So not a bad option if you've got him. I wouldn't say he's like top tier or anything, but you could certainly play around with one of these. Alika here is going to be the sister of Sakara, and also revives herself if Sakara's on the same team. Not the best synergy between the two. That's kind of like all they do together, but she can hit okay. Not a top tier Faction War epic by any means, but she can come in and do some damage for you if you've got her. Tashada, I would not recommend building. Her kit looks okay, but she just doesn't hit very hard, and she kind of just needs a buff. Her damage is based on defense and attack, and it's just hard to build her to do any damage actually, so not the best champion out there. Probably wouldn't recommend building one of her. Kalia is pretty cool. She's Aether's partner. She just doesn't do a lot of damage either, but if you're gonna run one, I would kind of recommend that you do run the other one. But again, not one of the best combos out there. She can put out some heal reduction and also heal herself if Aether's on the team, and then more healing here for herself. She also throws out some HP burns for you. Again, just kind of a mid-tier at best option, and I probably wouldn't recommend building her unless you just want to play with her and Aether together. Maeve is okay. She does have block revive here on this. It doesn't come into play a ton in Faction Wars, but you might be able to play around with her in Arena with that. She can put out some stuns. Higher chance, well, 100% chance if they're under a sleep, and she does put a sleep on her A1. So she can do some CC for you, but it's kind of all single target, so not fantastic. But, you know, she's not horrible, just not someone I'd really recommend 16. Baroth I actually really like a lot. We're gonna play around with him today. I just kind of got him leveled up and most of his mastery's done recently. He doesn't have books yet though, but books will definitely help this A3 to get to 100% for decreased attack and decreased defense. Is single target, but there's a 100% chance of placing those, and he also takes any increased attack and increased defense off the target when he does place those. So this is a pretty cool ability, especially for certain waves and boss fights, especially getting those both out there. But single target again, so not the best. AoE is always nice to see, but for a single target damage dealer, he actually deals decent damage. And then he can also put out a little bit of healing for you and a little bit of a shield on your allies if he is doing damage. So you do need to build him to deal pretty decent damage if you want this shield and heal to be anything substantial. And then his A1 has a chance of filling his turn meter and decreasing the turn meter of the enemy. So again, good for boss fights and pretty cool champion overall. I actually have enjoyed playing around with him some, so we'll see how he does today. Woad painted, absolute garbage. Do not build her. I don't know how she's never gotten a buff, but she's one of the worst in the game. Haikatoon is a great option, one of your free champions you get really early on, and she's a great speed lead for the arena early on, and she does have some good turn meter manipulation. She's got decreased turn meter, increased turn meter, and increased speed for you, and then decreased speed on enemies with her A1 there, and then of course the speed aura. So definitely worth bringing in if you've got one at 60. You might not have played with her in a while, but she's actually really underrated and a pretty good option for faction wars. Next we have Vala, another free champion. She was one of the Amazon gifts that we got way back in the day, so if you did happen to get her from the Amazon freebies, she's pretty good. I did use her when I first cleared 21. She's in pretty garbage gear for me, but she does pretty decent damage even in bad gear. She does put shield on herself and also increased defense, which is what her damage is based off of, and fills her own turn meter. I wish this gave an extra turn as well. It would make it a lot better. And it's kind of just a waste of a turn, but they are helpful buffs for her. And then she has an AoE here that removes all shield buffs, places decreased defense on all enemies as well in the same move there. So pretty cool move. And then if the target is under a shield buff, she will deal increased damage on her A1. So she's got kind of a lot of stuff going on with shield buffs, so pretty interesting champion and can actually deal pretty decent damage. That is Vala. Next we got Scyl. Scyl is also going to place decreased defense and weaken out there for you, again on a single target basis. And then she does have a kind of a weakish AoE here. If the first hit is critical, it will then attack all enemies, but it's not a very big hit. It's always going to be a normal hit, and it only deals 80% of the damage from the first hit. But she can come into a clan boss unkillable and do some pretty crazy damage for you, and could certainly work out in faction wars as well. But she's not bringing a ton of utility. Definitely would be better for like a boss fight situation with all that single target. Skytouch is a really good Void epic. She's probably one of the best healing champions in the game. It all kind of comes down to this passive here, which hurts her by 10% of her max HP and then heals everybody else by the half the damage that she lost. Also, this part of the skill kind of sucks, but it does place decreased speed on her and has a 50% chance of placing a fear. So that's kind of annoying, but it's not the end of the world. She still heals for a ton every time she gets a turn, and definitely still worth building. I use her in Faction Wars all the way up to 21, and she ranks out those heals. Also has a cleanse, a revive on death, and a block debuffs on allies for 2 turns. So really helpful for the boss, and just helpful for sustain the entire way through. And then she has an AoE, doesn't hit super hard. Usually you're not building her to deal damage, but it is an AoE on her A1 that will heal her by 15% of the damage if she has less than 50% HP, and if she's got more, it's going to give her some turn meter to keep her cycling back through. So she kind of needs either an alternate healer on the team or immortal regen sets to kind of counteract that health lost the A1 is typically not going to do it for you. So I have mine, I think, in 3 sets of Immortal, and that counteracts that pretty well and keeps her cranking out the heals for the whole fight. I believe that's it for the epics. Next we'll go into the rares, and there's a couple really good rares in here that I'd like to call out. Marked being one. She can put out the small version of decreased defense for you on her A1. It is a small version, but still pretty helpful. And then she's got an AoE that places decreased accuracy, which is helpful for a lot of the waves in Faction Wars. You can also put her in a stun set and get a little bit more utility out of that. And then she's got a block debuffs on all allies for 1 turn and 60% increased debuff or increased defense on all allies for 2 turns. So she's pretty good for clan boss. I think that's where most people would have used her if they did build her up already. Pretty good for clan boss and pretty good for most of the waves and definitely the boss fights here in Faction Wars. So if you've already leveled one of these up, absolutely use her. I wouldn't necessarily say go out of your way in 61 just to do 21, but she is a great rare. And then we've got War Maiden, who is kind of ubiquitous. She's farmable, really easy to get your hands on one of these, and she does an okay A2 here. It's going to give a 50% increase attack on her and place an extra hit if it's critical, so it is kind of helpful to max out her crit. But it doesn't do like tons and tons of damage, but it is, you know, kind of nice. And then AoE that places the big version of decreased defense at 100% if you book her. This is kind of what she's known for, and you can also put her in a sunset because of that AoE. But having AoE defense down on a rare is pretty crazy, and she's one of the best rares in the game because of that. And then her A1 is kind of neither here nor there, places a small poison on a fairly low chance. Next we've got Soulbond Bowyer. She has some great turn meter manipulation for you, really helpful in the boss fights. Hits pretty hard as well, but she's got a 25% additional chance of inflicting crits, and also a 100% when booked chance of fully depleting the target's turn meter. So really cool, kind of a Cold Heart-esque move there. It doesn't hit quite as hard as a Cold Heart's, but it's still in the same turn meter reduction, and she can be used in kind of the same fashion. Great for the boss fights. And then she's got a hit here that ignores 75% of defense, which hits pretty hard. So again, it's kind of making up for the lack of that max HP hit when compared to a Cold Heart. But it's definitely not going to hit quite as hard on bosses and that kind of thing. But it does hit hard, and then she's got an AoE on her A1. So again, another great candidate for a stun set. And a lot of her abilities here are going to give you that additional chance to inflict critical hits, so you don't have to build quite as much crit, and you can put that into either defensive stats or more crit damage on her. Pretty useful champion. And then I guess Ox isn't horrible. You could probably bring one of these in, especially for like the lower levels of Faction Wars. He could come in, but he can put out block cooldowns and has a little bit more chance of inflicting crits, and then he can put out decreased defense for you. That is the small version. And then he kind of cycles himself through his abilities faster with a little bit of turn meter increase on his A1. So not horrible, but I wouldn't go out of my way in 61. And then Barbarians actually have some of the better uncommons in the game. We're going to see a couple of these today at least, or one for sure. Dervish is crazy. I don't know if I'd use her for Faction Wars, but she actually has the highest multipliers in the game, which is insane. I don't know why an uncommon has the highest multipliers in the game, but she does. And it's on this A1 and the A2, it has really high multipliers as well. But it's a 2-hitter at random, so much better for boss fights. But this thing does hit really hard, and then this one does as well. I think this is like an 8.2 multiplier on that or something, which is insane. So could be on your team if you built one already. You're super late game, you just wanted to play around with one for clan boss. Could definitely come into your team and do some damage for you. And then we've got Shield Guard, who is actually an amazing champion. He's got a passive which removes a debuff at the start of each of his turns, which is insane to see on a uncommon. And then he's got this AoE here that also fills his turn meter on each critical hit. If you're hitting an entire wave with this, he basically fills himself back up to max turn meter again and then goes again. And it's on a 2-turn cooldown when fully booked. So I have mine in a stun set for Faction Wars. You could definitely put him in any kind of gear and he's going to do pretty good damage for you. And he just cycles through that AoE ability so quickly. And then you can put out decreased speed for you as well. So we'll see him in a second, see how he works out. He's a really cool champion, especially for an uncommon. And then we've got Zephyr Sniper, and you might have one of these built up if you used her as your spider tank. And if you've already got one of them built up, absolutely could come into your Faction War team as well. A lot of people have her in lifesteal for that, but she's also a great candidate for a stun set. She's got AoE here on her A1, and that can put the cooldown, or put a skill on cooldown when she hits somebody. And then she's got a continuous heal for all your allies. So pretty cool champion for an uncommon, and could definitely come in and deal some damage for you. She's defense based as well, or maybe even put her in a stun set and she'll do some CC for you as well. And then we've got Bully, who is incredible. I mean, look at that A1, probably the best A1 in the game. And that's all he needs. That's all he's got, and that's all he needs. So definitely bring all your bullies in as well. And that'll pretty much wrap it up for the Barbarians. Lots of good options here. Great options in the rares, great options in the uncommons. So this is a pretty easy faction, as there's just so many good options, and then you basically are going to get Scyl for free at some point, and 100% you should be bringing her into this fight. So, alright, let's take a look at some of the champions that I've got built up here for the Barbarians. First up is Cantra. She's in a defense set, an accuracy set, some mixed sets here. Pretty good defense on her. She's a little slow, honestly, for Faction Wars. Good crit rate, okay crit damage, and then plenty of accuracy to land those debuffs that she's throwing out there on her A2. I don't have her booked, but she works just fine without the books. And then for masteries, I came down into Helm Smasher. You could definitely do either War Master or Flawless Execution there in the offense tree, and then I went defense tree on her. Support would also be another good option. If I was going to do support, I'd probably take the accuracy, try to get down into Evil Eye here. That's good on anybody. And then probably Master Hexer. Actually, I don't even know if you'd want that, because you kind of do want the debuffs falling off so she gets the heals. But Support Tree would be another option for her, but this works out pretty well. Gives her the counterattack there. Next up is Scyl, and she is in kind of mediocre gear as well, to be honest. She's still got some level 12 gear there. Not super high defense, her crit rate isn't maxed, and she's got almost no crit damage. Just enough accuracy there to land her debuffs, but she is going pretty fast from those 2 speed sets we've got there. She does a great job even in this level of gear, and I'm pretty sure you could probably get some better stats onto her if you did have a little bit better gear. For instance, I'm pretty sure these boots are giving her basically nothing. She definitely doesn't need 2 rolls in flat attack. So not great gear on her, but she still does a great job. She is not booked at all, and she's got a couple of masteries here. Like I said, she does a great job even without masteries and books, so if you do master and book her, she will be even better. Next we're going to look at Skytouched. Like I mentioned before, she's in 3 sets of Immortal to help counteract that health loss that she's getting from her passive. She is going pretty fast. You want her going as fast as you can, just so she's getting turns often and doing her mega heals as often as possible. Doesn't need accuracy, she doesn't really need crit rate or crit damage. She just needs a pretty good health pool and to be going fast. So not the hardest champion to build because of that. Again, we've got some more gear we could roll here so that she could get a little bit better stats, but she's working just fine as she is. She is not booked either. You could book her for a little bit better heal on her passive there, and then this block debuffs and revive on death would be nice, and cleanse would be nice to have booked as well, but again, don't really need it. And then masteries on her. I just took a couple here in the support tree to make her heals bigger, and then a little bit in the offense, but again, she doesn't really need to be fully mastered at all to crank out the heals for you, so that's her build. Next we'll look at Baroth. Baroth is in a kind of a crappy savage set. He does have nearly max crit, but hardly any crit damage. Not really enough accuracy either. We definitely bumped that up a little bit, and definitely have some room for improvement on this gear, but I just kind of wanted to throw some stuff on here for this video. Skills, he's not booked yet, and then I did get most of his masteries done. I just wanted to come down here into War Master. I don't know if this is how I would actually end up doing his masteries. I might change this up a little bit depending on how these tests go, but this is one option that you could kind of start to follow here. It's not done completely, but we'll see. All right, here we are at stage 20, and I've set this up how I originally ran it for stage 20 and 21. I had Cantor in here and Vala, but I think we're going to take those two out and put in Shield Guard and Baroth and see how they do. So we'll just have Scyl as our legendary free-to-play champion. Skytouch was in the Rhodos fusion, I believe, so she was available then if you didn't pick up Rhodos. And then we got a rare that's farmable, Baroth, who was just in this most recent fusion. Hopefully you were able to pick up a spare copy of him, or if you didn't fuse the Slug, you might have another copy of him as well. And then Shield Guard, you've probably eaten 4,000 of him already. So let's just throw these guys in here and see how they do. Alright, so 4 minutes 20, not too bad for having some uncommons and rares on the team here. Scyl coming in big with the heals and also the stuns. I think you saw Shield Guard put out a lot of stuns there in that stun set. And then Skytouch Summon here with crazy amount of healing going on. Huge heals once she starts taking a little bit of damage. Baroth did pretty well. He came in second place after Shield Guard actually for damage. Did a little bit of healing as well, not a ton. And War Maiden throwing out those decreased defenses for us for speeding up the run a little bit. So overall, not a bad run, and definitely pretty impressed with the damage out of Shield Guard there. That was great to see. Let's try a 21 with this same setup. Alright, so here we are at the boss. Just gonna let it keep going on auto here for a little bit. Briefly go over what the boss is gonna do here. As you can see, he's placing those True Fears. That was his main ability here. AoE places True Fears for 2 turns. And then his regular A1 is going to be attack 2 random enemies and place Provoke. And both of these adds are going to heal him by a pretty good amount every turn, and then also place increased defense and increased speed on him. So you definitely want to focus down these 2 adds first, which is what the AI is going to do automatically, so we're just going to let it keep going here. Also, the boss will freeze you whenever you hit the boss. There's a chance of that happening, 20% chance, and it can't be resisted. So you either have to have block debuffs up, or you're just going to have a chance of getting frozen there, unfortunately. So we're just going to let this play on auto and see how it turns out. I think it's probably going to end up taking quite a while, so I'll probably speed it up or just skip to the end. So there we go, Faction Wars 21 done with some uncommons, some rares, a free-to-play Scyl the Drakes, and some fusion available champions as well here. This time actually beat my former time that I had when I had Cantrip in there as well, so that's kind of funny. Baroth did a ton of damage for us. Probably a lot of that is from the Warmaster procs on the boss there at the end. A little bit of healing, not a ton. Scyl did a lot of healing. Also, Skytouch, super crazy healing from her. You could see Shield Guard just sliding off those debuffs every turn with his passive. And then, of course, War Maiden with the AoE decreased defense. So this team actually worked out pretty well, better than I thought. So that is cool to see. Yeah, it really all comes down to Scyl. She's just putting out all those stuns for you, the heals, crazy. Pretty much anyone else here is replaceable. If you don't have Skytouched, you might need a little bit better gear on the other people to keep them alive, because she is doing a lot of healing for us. But yeah, pretty solid team there for 21. I still wouldn't want to wait 12 minutes every day to farm this, so I usually just farm 20. But yeah, there we go. So I've got 2 keys left over here for the Barbarians. Everything else is done. So I think what I'm going to do is just throw Shield Guard in here solo, just so you can kind of see how crazy he is. I'm going to be putting out a video on uncommon champions pretty soon, and we'll look at him a little bit more in that video. But just to use up these 2 keys and wrap this video up, we'll throw him in here and see if he can get it done. So there you can see his AoE, and then he immediately goes in for another hit. AoE. Another hit. That's wave 2. And there it comes again. So yeah, he's a really crazy champion. He can actually farm 12 free brutal in 5 seconds if you get lucky with the cooldowns. So awesome champion, definitely worth 60ing. If you want an uncommon for the Doom Tower, there are going to be some levels that require uncommons in the secret rooms or whatever they're calling them these days. So he's a great option for that. Really cool champion. But that pretty much wraps it up for the Barbarians. Hopefully this was enjoyable. If you liked this video and find it helpful, check out my other Faction War videos, and like and subscribe. Everybody have a good one.